Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Mark Gilbert.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So it's our weekly question. What if your mind is more than just a collection of thoughts? And what if it's the gateway to a whole new way of living? Welcome to Conversations in Mind. I'm Rev Barb, joined here by my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Mark Gilbert. And we are seeking to demystify the study of new thought and dive into the science and soul of consciousness. So whether you're a longtime seeker or curious about the power of your own perspective, we're going to dive into the mind. And our topic of minding today is, Mark?
It is how science of mind and new thought relates to aging, vitality, and the later stages of life. So what does the philosophy of new thought and science of mind say to these particular topics, which I think is a very timely topic, given that we are, especially in the United States, dealing with the many baby boomers aging into aging.
Into aging, that's good.
Aging into aging. It's that natural process. This topic gets covered by so many people in different ways. It's talked about from the financial aspect, the impact on our social security and healthcare systems, the impact on our lack of people working, younger people working in the workforce, et cetera. But we're really putting a more spiritual bent on it today. I think, that when we take new thought and science of mind, we're really looking at the fact that we are spiritual beings moving through a human experience, and that human experience includes later stages of life, and that includes his aging. So,
which includes some creaky bones and some hormones, right? Creaky bones and hormones. We could call it that. Creaky bones and hormones. That could be that.
Yes. So how does new thought deal with creaky bones and hormones?
There's a whole other show in there. I gotta write that down.
But the idea is that we're not necessarily here to address the typical topics that people talk about when they talk about the age wave, but we do recognize that even within our own communities, is that many of the CSL communities and New Thought communities, and churches in general, I would say, typically have an older audience in them. And so we have a lot of people who are at the later stages of life who come to spiritual teachings. So what do our teachings say and offer us as guidance and thoughts and advice on how we can navigate the later stages of life?
Well, it's funny because part of me, when I was thinking about this earlier, I was like, this is this could be a 3-minute show because it says the same thing about aging as it says about everything else. What do you think? What are your thoughts? And that's your experience, right? So I did hear a story. I was at the conference last week, the CSL conference in Reno, Nevada. And so I'm actually coming to you from my friend's house in Tacoma, in cloudy, lovely Tacoma, Washington today. So, they gave an award to a practitioner, and they were talking about how this person goes to prayer for everything, like everything beyond everything, in a way that sounds like this is what she does all day, every day, right? And so she was getting this, I don't even remember which award it was, but I do remember that she was 96.
Wow.
Yeah. And doing the do. And I was like, okay, that tells me something about this woman's connection and what that does to her vitality and awareness and, livingness, I think. Which is, interesting because I'm in my early 60s. And I have been having this experience over the last year or so of meeting women who are in their early 70s who are really struggling physically or mentally or both, and just kind of not well, not necessarily having a thing, but not well. And then I'm meeting these other people in their early 70s who are walking the Camino and riding their bikes and doing all this other thing. And I'm like, clearly at this point in my life, there are two paths to choose. There are two paths. One is active and vital and keep moving and continue to grow. And the other is to sit on my couch and watch TV and let everything fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true both physically and spiritually. You know, like these things show up physically and spiritually. So spiritually, what are we doing to grow our connection? You talk about this a lot. What are we doing to grow our connection to spirit and to that one life, one energy? And how are we letting that flow through our life and show up in us? So it's kind of the same at any age, really, but more so now.
Mm-hmm.
More
so
vital now.
State of mind, actually, a state of mind.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. In preparation for this topic, I went back and looked to see if I could find anything Ernest Holmes had written on the topic. And essentially, that's what it came down to.
You did homework. Thank you.
Yes, this once. The dog didn't need it. But he really was reflecting on that, because I thought, well, did Holmes ever talk about living forever, you know, in a human body? And he didn't. You know, yet we have these people out there, especially materialist people who think that we're going to become some sort of hybrid cyborg kind of people, that our bodies replaced by, artificial parts and continue to live, people lives.
What do they call it? Biohacking?
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
But the intention being to extend the life of this physical form on as far as possible. And, not that, if they want to pursue that, yay, that's one way spirit can look at itself and experience itself. But I think that for most part, I look out and say, as I started with, we're spiritual beings at our roots. Spiritual means transcending this physical form. But we're in these physical lives for a reason, for the bliss of the divine, for the God to experience it itself, and for us to go through it as kind of a learning experience. And one of the things that I've noticed as we move through this human life is that everything around us moves in cycles. It moves in cycles of newness to youth, to its flourishing level, to its waning states, to its point where it's in its later stages and getting ready to appreciate and release itself and move into a void of state of non-being. And that cycle starts over for many people, which could look at reincarnation if we wanted to. But for the forms on this planet, every form, whether it's an atom, a molecule, an animal, a plant, and humans, we move through these cycles at different speeds and different stages.
Yes.
So that we can, I was thinking about the fact that as a pet owner, I've had dogs that I watch that cycle of life, and I get to experience their entire cycle through the time of my life. Yet I remember years ago a friend who had a bird, and she was having to make plans for the fact that the bird would outlive her.
Yeah.
And so the bird was going to be witnessing and experiencing their relationship in a longer cycle than of where my friend was going to be the one who was going to get released from this form, and the bird would continue. And what that shows is this is a continuous process of everything arcing around through life's cycles. And we see that. And so as part of our human journey, we're all moving through this. And at some point, we get into the later stages and releasing this. So from a physical standpoint, I guess what I want to say is that Science of Mind teaches us that our state of mind leads us to the type of experience that we'll have in that later natural stage of aging. So we can live aging as a state that we are denying and pushing back on or not enjoying, or we can see it as a blissful state of appreciation and joy for having earned the ability to relax and release and enjoy that state of life. But at the same time, be okay in releasing our form because we know the eternal nature of our being, rest in spirit.
Amen. End of story, really. Like,
yeah,
this might have been too easy of a topic.
Talk more.
Yeah, this might have been almost too easy of a topic. But I think so. When I hear the biohacking thing, for instance, I think, I'm always like, is this that we are afraid to go through those stages? Are we afraid of dying? Because it's one thing to be like not wanting to be ill while you're here.
Mm-hmm.
I get that totally. But needing to get to be 120 or 150 and extend life in that way, is that just a fear-driven response to not knowing what's next? Or yeah, I personally can't come up with any other reason for it. So maybe I'm missing something in the desire to be that old, but I don't really have a desire to be that old, obviously. So,
yeah, if you look at it, that a person thinks that everything is physical matter,
yeah,
the scientific
and
materialist,
that this is going to be it. This
right.
End of story, right?
Yeah, and you believe that when this form dies, you're gone. Then there can be, you have what American society is, which is something that doesn't like talking about death because so many people are materialist, and they're afraid that there's nothing after this experience, and so that when they die, that's the end, game over. Flashing on this.
Yeah, no more influence, I guess, or something. I don't know. Because there's two things in that. One is this idea of a continuation of life in a different form, different plane, different experience, whatever you want to call it. The other is an acknowledgement that you made an impact, you did good things, and it's the next generation's work to pick that up. And you and I were talking a little bit about this before the show, because we've had this experience of leaving organizations where we felt like we made a difference. And then hearing people talk about the past, like we were sitting on our hands, not doing anything, and I guess that's just the natural evolution of things. I'm kind of in the middle of that a little bit, but I know you have been too.
Yeah, our ego side wants to be acknowledged for the actions and things that we did in this world.
Yep.
And the roles that we played to create things. And so we still have, to a degree, an attachment over our worldly successes. And so that whole idea of creating a legacy through some form, so there's an acknowledgement that we mattered during our parentheses in eternity that we were here. That when we leave, there's some marker that those who come after us will remember us for what we did. And then, and that's an egoic.
For one generation, maybe two.
Yeah.
And then we're done. And by then, if we do believe in reincarnation, we're probably back doing something else by then, right?
Or if our consciousness is anchored in the divine eternity of all it is, and transcends time and form, then we recognize that we just played a role for the divine and moving the ball around while we were here.
But I think, but that paradox, that thing of letting go of, okay, I did these things and now everyone's forgotten about it, is, now that I'm sitting here with you talking about it, is letting that go is kind of good practice for, first of all, being in the now and living in this now moment of creation where we're creating something else, taking all that we learned and gained from those experiences and creating something else. Here we are doing this thing, right? And then also letting go to allow the space for something else to show up in our what's next in our evolution and in our growth and pattern of life. So that, because if we're holding on to what we did before, it's kind of hard to go into what is next unless we are trying to do the same things again.
Yeah, you're right. We're blocking our next phase of life. But there's another way. We're also blocking the other expressions of the divine who are coming along in the tracks behind what we had laid down. And so there's always new babies being born, new people moving into adulthood, new people at the peaks of their careers. And sometimes we others who have played that peak role need to move out of the way to allow the next wave of the peak people to have that experience.
It's true. Yeah. And we forget. It's funny because we're so forgetful, We are like everyone has already forgotten that only 4 or 5 years ago, we were doing all of this in COVID, a shutdown. And or they forget that, 10 years ago, we were doing all this. Zoom didn't exist. Cell phones barely existed. Like, it's not very long ago that all these technologies which have changed everything have also changed our ability and how we did work and what we grew and what we could grow and how we could reach people. It's all different now. And so people that are doing it now completely forget that we did not have those tools.
Right.
That we were actually writing notes by hand in a meeting, in an actual physical meeting someplace that we had to fly to.
And if we want to extend the timelines out even a little further, we can think about the fact that, I can remember the first color TV I saw, and I can remember certain technological things that we so much take for granted. I remember when email started and the internet and
when I worked for FedEx, I was in management with FedEx. We had those envelopes that you put a department name and a name of a person, and it went into the bag and went to Memphis and got sorted with everything else to get to where it needed to go so somebody could read the piece of paper inside it. Because there was no email.
So if you look at it from that standpoint,
we are so ancient.
Well, how technology has changed. But the other thing that I would have to say is there's this overlapping lifetime that I experienced of my father, who, was in his later years, lived with my wife and I. And he experienced, before a life of no air travel, the automobile came into being, or existence into early in his life. There were all these things that in television, radio, all these things started during his lifetime, to us going to where we were on the moon, from that. And so it's easy to look at his lifetime, and then we overlap that to a degree, and then our kids are coming after that and they're overlapping it, and our grandkids even later. And so the experiences that they're going to have in their life are going to be so much technologically advanced. And so we're all going through our own circle and our own experience while this technological timeline keeps advancing. And
Yes.
we're all sort of experiencing chunks of the technological changes as we move through our human arc. And we got to celebrate the things that we experienced and be okay to the fact that we're releasing, and celebrating and enjoying the things that our life has brought us, but also creating the space for us to move on so others can experience what's next as well.
Right. And, acknowledging a certain amount of obsolescence, I guess, in a way,
Which is part of the expression, is part of us as the divine experiencing life through us, is we have to have that newness. We have to be the ones creating all that newness. And we also have to be the ones acknowledging, look at what I did. And then releasing all of this and just celebrating a life well lived. And
celebrating the life well living now, doing whatever it is that we're doing, even if it's on the couch, right? Or if it's not so doingness. And I think that's a big shift that's going on in kind of in the world anyway. Younger people are like, wait a minute, you people worked your asses off your whole lives and then you got laid off. Like, we're not doing that,
Mm-hmm.
So acknowledging that there's this change now in the pace of things. And personally, I celebrate that and think it's long overdue. And now that I've learned more about it, but where was I going with that? Really, I keep coming back to this 96-year-old woman who prays about everything, right? And so in my imagination, she's in this constant conversation of what's possible.
right.
What's new, what's possible, what's coming in, what's moving through, not what was coming, not what was.
So hold that thought. We're going to pick up on that in just a second, but we want to encourage anybody who's enjoying this conversation to support the New Thought Media Network. Let's listen to this message. And if you need to, pause this recording so that you can catch the QR code that's going to go by on the screen. and help support the network that makes this possible for you.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
So we hope you are liking the programs and that you support the New Thought Media Network. And be sure to drop comments and suggestions. Barb and I will probably mention this again towards the end, but we really want to hear your feedback on these conversations. And we've been getting some feedback. That's great. And include topics that you would like us to discuss in the future. We've already been getting some of those coming into. So some of the suggestions we've been getting, you'll be seeing in some of the upcoming episodes.
Awesome. So you and I are in a little different place in this aging thing. You're a minute older.
Right. I'm in my early 70s.
Yeah, and I'm in my early 60s. So, and I've just been through a year where like I'm sort of in this place of I don't really know what's next, and I'm not even sure what I want. So this is kind of a weird conversation for me. But what I know about you and part of what I love about you is that you have been really good, and I don't know if it's good at or if it's just this something within you at staying learning, at continuing to learn, at continuing to lean into things that are new. You're the master of the technology behind this. I would be stuck right now. But you're also like, you are in this continuous learning about a spirit, about spiritual growth and the spiritual path. What pulled you to keep that learning thing going? Like what is it? I mean, I know you had interest in the archives, but lots of people have an interest in the archives for a minute. You dove into them and posting, I mean, what is the pull? What I know that makes you happy. I guess it makes you happy. I don't know. Like, tell me, what is it? Like, what got you there? Or what is it? Is it just how you've always been?
It's not how I've always been. I think that I didn't care about learning until I was in college in late teens, early 20s. And there was something that just birthed in me. I think part of it was that I was told, oh, you better try in college or it's so hard you're going to fail kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, I really got to try. And so I got in there and I aced through college. And I felt blessed in doing that. But it ignited in me a love of learning, a love of trying to understand things. And I became on this sort of quest. It's almost like life is a puzzle, and that we're living in the middle of this vast mystery of life.
Yeah.
And everything is a mystery. I can go into a job and I don't know what the hell I'm doing in the job, and I've got to learn the job and figure it out and master it so I can feel successful in it. And so part of it was an inner drive to be successful in things. I was always learning what I needed to learn. And I remember when we were talking about technology a moment ago, when they first put email and computers into our office, they would sit over in the corner. And I said, well, let's go figure this thing out. I would be the one who got the book out and figured it out and, programmed automated letters for an office and things like that.
Yeah.
Simply because I loved doing that kind of thing. But so there's always been this learn how the world works and get some satisfaction out of it. But there's always been this learn how the universe and life in general works, transcending this. And I've always had this sort of general trying to make sense of life. And I would say that probably what feeds me most of the time now is listening to intuition. And I have, the older I've got, the more I've appreciated the fact that there is an access to intuitive knowledge that you can listen to and guide your life, and that it helps point you in the direction of what's the next puzzle piece you need to gather. And I know if you can see all these books back here, I'll simply say there are times when I sit in meditation and a book will pop into my mind, and I got into something, and it will lead me like a little rabbit hunt back there, that I'll go find a book and I'm like, why this book? And it'll point me to something else. It'll mention another book, and I'll go find that book. And, I finally find, oh, it's this. This is what I need to be reading.
This is what I wanted.
The thing that needed to, is the puzzle piece that's answering some question that was floating around within me. And so when I have those aha moments, they are magical to me. They're like, it's like the universe became a little clearer. It's like when remember the old concentration TV game when they'd guess the puzzle pieces and turn it over, and you got to do a little bit more. And if finally you go, I get it.
But it's like a gift too. You react to it like it's a gift.
It is. If we can see that.
It's not just a puzzle piece, it's a gift. And the celebration of that is probably what keeps your energy up and keeps you going, in many ways. I mean, I don't know, I've watched a number of men in my family and in my church community who retired and just lost all sense of purpose and didn't live healthily for very long after that. And you have definitely not done that. You've defied all of that in many ways, not just with, part of it's your family, I know, but your learning quest has been admirable.
Well, there's a book that came out a number of years ago called Don't Retire, Rewire, I think was the name of the book or something like that. And I related to it because I've gone through, people sometimes kid me because I've retired several times. And every retirement, I never saw it I saw it as sort of a letting go, that cycle I was talking about of that job. But it was also the void where I moved into a space of, okay, what's next? Yeah. And I moved into something new and then would get involved and deeply in that. And throughout my life, I'm at different points in different areas of the circle or the cycle where I may be at the peak at something and letting go of something else in my life. But in general terms, government career for many years, released that. Ministry for many years, released working with CSL Home Office, moved into working with the archives and the excitement of doing stuff on that and with that. And every time it's been intuitively driven. Now, I say all this to go back to the aging topic because what it tells us is it's back to that outlook that you have in life.
Yes.
About how do you want to age? And I have friends who retire and I'm going to play golf. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to stay out of my wife's way. There are these kinds of, don't really have a plan. I get up every day and I'm like, it's a blessing. What do I get to do? And there's things I'm involved with that I think are exciting and fun. And I feel like I'll always be doing something that brings some excitement to me. And so if that's a model for somebody else that's listening, I'd encourage you to think about, as you move through these stages of life, what brings you excitement? What brings you joy? How can you bring more of that into your life? How can you use these later years as an opportunity to celebrate your accomplishments and what you're looking forward to next?
How would you describe your call it prayer and meditation practice? Has that changed in this post-retirement time? Is it more? Is it less? Is it that you're just living in this state of curiosity? Or I don't know. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just.
No, that's okay.
I think you're a really amazing model for moving through some of this early letting go of the career thing and staying vital and active and mentally active.
As far as spiritual practices, Barb, I appreciate the kind words, but they are sort of like on a separate track of throughout my life. I've had spiritual practices and meditations and aspects of how I stay in tune with divine. I would say that my current practice is morning meditation with a cup of coffee beside me.
Yes.
But I think that the meditation has become one that it's quieting the mind and allowing myself to tap into a universe that I know that transcends this form of mark. And even that process has been changing. And sometimes it sounds like a cliche, but I go with the flow of whatever I'm feeling. There are times I can sit in silence and just be quiet and still and feel blessed for the existence of life. There's other times I get the hit like I was talking about to go find a book and read something because maybe it has the answer to something that I'm seeking. And then lately, I've been moving through a lot of spiritual practices that deal with non-duality and oneness. The current one I'm using is sitting in silence, and then sometimes I'm have my eyes open and I'm going around saying, I'm not the world, I'm not this body, I'm not these thoughts, and then who am I? And stepping back out of the world, the body, the thoughts, and realizing that I am the spiritual oneness, that I am spirit, that I am beyond this, whatever, the non-dual state, which all
the energetic connection with all that is.
Yes. And it's a witness. It's actually taking a perspective of being a witness, because we walk around like we're witnesses in a world where I'm Mark and this is my deal in the life. And I'm going on, with all this interactions with the world form. And so my identification, what's my perspective? It's Mark and the world. Mark with his thoughts and his body walking around in the world. But when you can shift out of this and see the witness behind all this and just seeing this, then it takes you in a way to different perspective where you recognize that you really transcend all of this. And then that gives you an appreciation for this. And then you come back into your life and you live it from a standpoint where you can, yes, I am this and this and this. I'm everything. And so at first you're sort of denying I'm not these things so that you can let go of the identification with form. But then once you work on that, then you come back into it and see that you are one with it. You transcend it, but you're also part of this. And that leads you into a different way of looking at life. It leads you into looking at life as not attached to what's going on. I think the Buddhists like to call this lila, or the play of life, and that we're moving through a play. And so when you look at it that way, you say, well, that's just what the play is playing right now. And it's not about me. It's not about, because we want to go bring it back to an egoic need of Mark in the world and Mark's success and et cetera, et cetera. And when you can disidentify with that and see it more as a temporary play that you're moving through, and it actually adds a vitality to life, and it opens you up. I'll say one more thing about this, because you've sort of pushed a button for me with a question.
No, I didn't know that. I did not know we were going to go down this road, and it's brilliant and beautiful. And this people are. I think that people will really appreciate and love this. Honestly, what you've just said.
I find myself, Barb, though, that I really like talking to people. I'm out in nature, or I'm walking Penny at the park, or we go out shopping, and in a conversation. Mary asked me last night what was the best part of my day. It's a little thing we do every day, and I go, well, it was this and this. I said, but I also enjoyed talking to that woman as I stood in line at the post office mailing a package. We had a long line, and she started talking about the long lines, and I said, yeah, but the last few times I've been over here, they've moved so quickly. And then we got into talking about the government service. And I had this wonderful conversation, and the time just went by. And next thing we knew, they were calling us up to the counter. And it was a joyful expression. But when you let go of, because we walk around in life, what are people going to think about me? Mm-hmm. Or how can I talk to this? Well, I'm at the point where it's like, it's almost cliche, because they talk about people when they get older, it sort of break down the barriers of caring what people think about them. And to a degree, that's true. But there's also a spiritual aspect to it where if we can let go of that sort of like shell we put around ourselves, the egoic shells, I think in the final stages of life, we realize how they're not real.
Right.
They're a creation.
Really, they're just this front that we put on, right?
Yeah. And it breaks us down, and it connects us to other people. And every day I have some sort of connection with some person somewhere that's just a joy to talk with them. And that reinforces for me the interconnectedness of it. So it becomes a spiritual practice to interact with people in life.
It also, it seems like what I'm hearing also, it feeds that sense of curiosity. Yes. And, because that feeds, it seems what I'm hearing is that feeds on itself in a way and continues to keep it growing and alive and vital and part of who you are. And I love that question. What was the best thing about your day today? What a great practice, right?
Yeah, because it's part of a gratitude thing. A lot of people do gratitude journals. We typically most days stop and say, what was the best thing about the day?
I love that. That's a beautiful way to do life together, honestly. And so, and some of this, reminds me of this. It's interesting because you're talking about peeling back, letting go, being part of it. And like, it's that paradox of new thought. I talked about this a little bit last Sunday when I was in Tacoma. What we teach is control your thinking, control your mind, control your outcomes, gain things, do things, get a better job, all that stuff. And then really what we say is let all that go and surrender.
Yes.
And so the state of surrender really is the state of not giving in. Surrender is not about giving in. It's about allowing this connection, oneness, dropping away of the false self and showing up in the world in this brighter, more brilliant way.
Yeah. Letting go of the barriers that we create. We create barriers between ourselves and others. Mm-hmm. Another way that it shows up is in conversations with people, is that we often are not listening to others because we're waiting to get our word in about, I did this and this and this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we all do it. It's not, we're not, we all do it at some level, but.
Yeah. And I won't say that I don't do it. I do it. I'm waiting to drop my, Mark did this into the conversation. But there's also a point where you go, I'm more curious about them telling me about their story than me having to share my story with them.
Yes. Or to ask another question, ask a better question. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, honestly, like this, I know I turned it into you, but honestly, this was really good for me. So I appreciate it. Like, I think there are a lot of us in this sort of space where we're changing our life around letting go of a job, letting go of, having life happen, whatever it is, and trying to get out of the driving, striving mentality, but also keep curious and keep some sort of momentum that feels forward, but without driving. And that's been this interesting space for me anyway, in this time period, is like, I don't want to be striving anymore, but I don't know how to doing without striving. So kind of trying to strip back from that and be more conscious and aware of how to approach what is next or mine to do.
Yeah, you're really talking about the next step into the cycle, because when we're first born into the cycle, we're learning how to strive.
Right.
We're learning how to do and be in the world. And then as we get to our prime parts of life, we hone our skills in manifestation of stuff, relationships, careers, jobs, money, etc. Mm-hmm. And then when we get later in life, we start letting go of that, and we look for other things, and we realize that there's more to life, and that letting go of the things that served us for so many years is hard. It's hard to do that because we had so much success built around the doingness and the skills that we developed,
and we were fed a lot of praise and a lot of good, and good, all the things that we were fed that kept us in that mode. Yeah.
And now we're having to learn how temporary they were, how transitory they were, and we have to develop new skills. And the new skills is stepping back and witnessing our life from the later stages and going, okay, now I can rest, I can be appreciative, I can explore the things that I want to explore and not feel like my daily time is taken up by, the needs of others or organizations.
And you can ask the question, who am I really now?
Yeah. Who am I?
Who am I? And is who I am all of those things that we did, or is who I am really something different from that?
And the interesting thing for me, Barb, is that as you approach our teachings, you find that they address every stage of life. Mm-hmm. You and I've talked about previously the fact that so much of science of mind tends to focus on manifestation of material stuff. But that's a necessary step for people moving through the,
learning faith, learning trust, learning, practicing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but when we come back to the teaching later in life, or after we've mastered to a degree the manifestation stuff, we recognize that there's a deeper aspect of the teaching where it's really calling us to be more in tune with knowing oneness, tasting God, living from a state of non-duality, recognizing that we're more than these physical beings in this temporary state of time and form that we're going through.
Yes. I was using a quote from Ernest Holmes in my talk, a couple of them recently, actually, because they were in different places. So, but it was from one of his talks out of Love and Law, and he was like, if I could, and the essence of it was like, if I could just convince you to believe that this works. If you could just, and I like to imagine like he's pounding on the podium almost like, because he was older then, right? When we was doing, if we could just convince you to believe that this works and stay in that belief. And it's true. It's kind of just the essence of it is just really true. Like, as we believe, right? Yeah.
One of the things that was instrumental and interesting for me in understanding Holmes was in putting together the Asilomar book, Ernest Holmes at Asilomar, because it's based on his talks that he did at Asilomar in the 1950s, and it's to a group of people who are familiar with religious science, and so he gets into more metaphysical concepts in there. Yeah.
And he was older and had mellowed.
Yes.
Had some mystical experiences and
he also lost his wife in the later part of the 50s, and that had a major impact on him.
Yeah,
she was his primary companion, and but what you find is that he tailors his talks. He does Sunday talks, and he does magazine articles, and he does radio shows, and they're all for the general audience. But they're for groups who are really deeper into the philosophy. His classes and his talks at Asilomar, he got into much more mystical and metaphysical stuff, where he really got into and stressed the importance, the less importance of the material and the more importance of the experience of the spiritual.
Yes.
And I think that later in life, he realized how very important that was. And I think that's what I think we've been talking about to a degree, is that this later, I think what New Thought and Science of Mind offers us is that as we move to the later stages of life, we recognize that the peak of our materialistic nature of life has happened. And we're now moving into a state of appreciating all the experience that we've been through. And now coming and recognizing and sensing at a deeper level our spiritual truth and bringing that more fully into who we are, so that by the time we shed these earthly forms, we'll be ready for that next journey.
Yeah, it's like we titled it backwards. We called it Love and Law, and really it's learn law to move into more love.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it was law to love. Might have been a better title. I don't know. Wow. Well, okay. This was beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thanks for asking the question. And
yeah.
Well,
we appreciate. I was going to say, you go. We appreciate you being here with us and in this conversation. Look forward to reading your feedback and reading your suggestions for upcoming shows. Please consider supporting the New Thought Media Network. They're doing good work in the world and helping us all to bring something new out into the conversation. And we will see you again next Tuesday.
Everybody.